Well, I remember when I first read the script. Actually, I read a breakdown in my agent's office, and I went, wait, this is me. I have to do this. I mean, this is a perfect part for me. And it was that first, and maybe only time since then, that I really thought that. And I don't think that happens very often, where it feels like a perfect fit. And so then I went in. I think my first thing was a dance audition. You had to bring in your own music, so I brought in a little cassette of the Jackson 5, like "I Want You Back" or something. And I was probably wearing leg warmers because, you know, it was the 80s. I stuck that tape in, and it was at this place on Broadway in like 41st Street. And I remember going up there and being so scared, and all these people in the hall, and putting my tape in and just kind of like freaking out, just like freaking out dance-wise, just like I don't even know what I did. My body just like was out of control. It was just dancing the way I danced when I was totally free. But I was in a very unfree environment, and I just was like access some kind of spirit. And I think that's when it happened. I felt it. I felt like, oh, I nailed it. You know, I just knew that was part of what this girl's journey was about. It was about just like a natural feeling, and as opposed to a trained dancer. And even though I'd had a lot of dance training, that enabled me to kind of get in touch with that or really know how to do that stuff. It was more of a feeling than dance steps. Like, I didn't have any choreography at all. I just literally just lost it, you know? And I knew it went really well, and I think I had to do a couple of scenes. And then I think I had another call back where I had to dance with different dancers, different actors. But there were like some were just dancers who were, you know, trying to act, and there were some actors who were trying to dance. And it was, I remember Billy Zane was one of my dance partners. I thought he was going to get it, actually, because he was very like Brando. You know, he was very had this really kind of sexual Brando thing. And his dancing was pretty good, you know, but it wasn't. And then I danced with this other guy who was more of a dancer, and he was kind of whipping me around and throwing me around, because it was really about making themselves look good, you know, kind of like a rag doll at the end of their arm. And then there was Patrick. And when, you know, we had done Red Dawn together, so we had known each other quite well. And I remember us dancing together, and it was just all of a sudden very easy. I was a good girl at home, in high school, and growing up. I was really, really good. And I had this whole double life as a teenager, where I'd go to Studio 54 every night with my boyfriend, and had this very kind of secretive, dark life, rebellious. And I needed to do that because I was deeply attached to my parents. So without that, I'd probably still be living with them today instead of having my own family. But I think it's part of, you know, any breaking away, which is a lot of what the story was about, was, you know, breaking away from your family of origin and individuating. And I think that's what I did before I did Dirty Dancing. I did it at Studio 54. It was a huge deal. I mean, I knew that I would have to, you know, carry the picture with somebody else. I knew that it was a whole other world. But it was before any independent movies were ever seen by anybody. So it was not, there was really no chance of anyone seeing this movie. It was more of like an exercise. Like, oh, you see what it'll be like to be a lead, but no one will ever see this movie, because it was a movie that was being made for nothing in a time when there were no movies being made for nothing. So there was really, it was maybe also going to be a little like blue, it felt. You know, like a little like maybe my parents, I wouldn't want them to see this movie. I couldn't tell what the movie was. I didn't have a sense of if it was going to be really dirty, and I was going to be like a pawn in this kind of weird softcore porn movie, or if it was going to be like a weird, like, I didn't know if it was, I didn't know what it was, because it wasn't, you know, there'd been Flashdance, and I'd almost gotten Flashdance. I think I had screen tested maybe 8 or 10 times for it. It was like the one that got away. I was so messed up over it, you know, and I was so crazy about just like you know, Adrian Lyne and this, like, all that just raunchy dancing in high heels. Just, to me, that was just like my idea of heaven, you know? But when I lost that, I think I was devastated. So this was like my next chance. And there were these, you know, there was moves like Footloose around, there was movies with dancing, but I couldn't tell what this was. And this was not a studio movie. So it didn't feel like a regular movie shooting it either. It just felt like an experiment or something. We went to Virginia, I think, about 2 weeks early. And I think that might have been the most fun part of the whole movie for me. I think maybe the first day of learning how to do the dancing with Kenny before the screen test, that was like a really high point. And then I think the screen test was really fun, but a lot of pressure. But then the rehearsal, I think, was maybe the best time of the whole movie for me, because it was just, I remember being in the studio with Miranda, who was just a wonderful, wonderful person, and Kenny, who had an incredible energy. He had a way of just making everybody fall in love with him. And he was just very fun and sexy, and just the right amount of sexy and just the right amount of playful, you know what I mean? It was just like, it created a really just juicy atmosphere. It's the only way I know how to put it. And it was just doing this dancing for hours every day and learning the choreography and learning this like whole world of dancing that I'd never knew anything about, seen, experienced, done. And then we would, you know, get together, I think in the evenings, and do the scenes. And we would go through the scenes and kind of fix things and tweak things and decide what the scene was about. We would, I think the afternoons were like, we'd go to this little bungalow and rehearse the scenes. And it was just kind of like working through the whole movie for about 2 weeks. And I think that was the greatest. I think there was a lot of pressure and fear also, and anticipation, because, you know, the costume fittings, it's just all the stuff that goes into it. But it felt very magical to me when I think back on it now. I remember like difficulties. I remember what was really difficult. I remember like the swimming in the lake was very, 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 very cold, like horrific. Like, I don't think anyone could ever get me like that cold at this point in my life. It was a young thing, I think. You know, young and hungry. You have to be really young and hungry to get in water that cold for that long. It was not good. But I remember thinking, like, can you die if your nipples explode? Like, it just didn't feel like healthy to be in that water. That was hard. I remember doing like the big dance finale, and I remember they just painted the stage and it was sticky, and when I turned on it, the paint would just like stick to my feet, so I couldn't turn. And then it got really glossy and really glassy and really like too shiny and slippery. And then they put Coke on it to try to make it tackier, and it was just like trying to find a good surface and doing it all with like all the extras sitting around, like just hundreds of people watching you about to like fall on your face. I mean, I went to a screening of it with my agent at the time, who was just like, no. And by the end of the screening, I knew that she hated it. And I just went home and I just thought, you know, what have I done? And she made it clear that she didn't think anyone would ever see it, and that whoever did see it wouldn't blame me. That's what she said. And I was just devastated. And I was just like, I just thought, well, it's shocking enough to see yourself that big on a screen for that long a period of time, doing that many things. And it was just, that was just very, very hard. And then to have the person you're watching it with not like it at all. So I was very, very despondent about the whole thing. And I just basically went about my life and just assumed that no one would ever see it, and that I would, you know, just go on, maybe do something else other than act, and just, it was just over for me. And then I remember feeling like there was all of a sudden a little bit of excitement. There was a screening, like closer to the opening, like a press screening, and there was a lot of electricity in the air, and a lot of excitement. And people all of a sudden didn't think I was awful. And I thought, maybe I'm not awful. And I thought, I'm not so awful. Actually, I'm kind of good, And it was really, it was a little bit of a different cut, but how different could it have been, I guess a couple of days before the movie opened, there's a picture of me and Patrick on the front page of the Arts and Leisure section, the Sunday New York Times. And I think the picture was maybe half a page, like the top half of the page. And I was like, oh, so it's like that. I was like, oh, that's a whole different scene, Maybe someone's going to see this movie, But it was like that sleeper hit that they were talking about, but what did that really mean? And, and is it possible? And it was just bizarre, because it really went from, there's no chance anyone's ever going to see this, and it's bad, and I'm bad in it too. You're America's sweetheart.